into our sort of Q&A session. We've got a couple of people with kind of varying ranges of experience with remote work. And so we're just going to be primarily answering questions, I hope. But if there aren't too many questions, we'll just kind of talk about our experiences with remote. I will be helping with that. So I'll give my introduction real quick. My name's Thomas Randolph. I've been working remote for about 6 years. My first job was not remote, but every job since then has been. I started on more full stack stuff, so PHP, MySQL, that kind of stuff. And then I moved into front end kind of exclusively. With me on this QA session will be Nick. Nick, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is Nick. I've been doing software development for about 3 years now. Went to the Turing School. That's kind of how I made my connection with Mike. Me and Gabe, one of our other organizers, went to the JAMStack conference a few years ago. That's kind of what kicked off my excitement about the JAMStack, and just love, sharing information and having a space where we can talk about cool tech and stuff.
And then in addition, I think that Zach might jump in with some of his experience with remote as well. So Zach, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm Zach. I'm a software developer over at Frontier Airlines right now. Been doing software for about almost 5 years. Kind of started in back end work and kind of moved into front end, and it's been kind of a interesting time with Frontier moved all their developers to full remote. So, and we previously weren't. So this has been my first full remote experience. So it's been definitely unique time to kind of experience it for sure. And we got a cat.
Great. So if anybody has any pressing questions, we can just start off with that. If not, I'll give everybody like maybe a minute to think of a question. If not, I can give my like spiel on remote. So if you have any questions, please just yell them out.
I guess I have a question,
Go
Thomas.
for it. Go, Gabe.
I was wondering what each of your work environments were like.
Zach, what was your experience being kind of? Oh, I think my connection might be bad.
That's okay.
It's all right.
Yeah, there's some
Zach,
delay.
I was going to ask. Zach, I was just going to ask, what's your experience been like being kind of thrown into the remote position, even though that's not what you signed up for?
Yeah, so I've always kind of been interested in the idea of full remote work, like especially after meeting Thomas, and he's been doing it for a while. He kind of started getting the idea in my head a little bit more. But it has been an interesting shift, and I imagine a lot of companies have kind of gone through this where none of them signed up to be remote. So either some people are okay with it, or a lot of them just haven't adjusted well. I mean, from my personal experience, I've been perfectly fine with it. I've really enjoyed it. I've just been, trying to find the separation between work and home is kind of the biggest challenge that I have found personally. And I know as for at least the team at Frontier, like a lot of the developers have been really open to remote work, so it hasn't been too big of a shift for us. Like a lot of us kind of, did remote here and there, like when we needed to. So, but yeah.
Harry, do you think that did that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. My connection's pretty garbage, so I'm really going in and out. But
thanks for the delay. Yeah, so there's a couple other questions in chat. I'll vocalize this one from Daniel. How do you stay or feel connected to your team? I can start off answering that one. The other guys might have some great insight, just kind of going remote recently. I work at Gitlab.com. We are an all remote company. We don't have any offices, so our structure is sort of all around how do we work remote effectively, and part of that is staying and feeling connected to your team. A big part of it for me is that we try very hard to have social calls like this. So we intentionally take a break from work and jump on a call and talk about whatever. Today I had a call with a couple of my coworkers, and we talked about stocks and investing and motorcycles and dogs and a couple of other things. So it was just nice to have that chat and not talk about work stuff. Um, there is nothing to replace real social interaction. So as a company, GitLab gets everyone together every 9 months, and we just meet our teammates. That didn't happen this year for viral reasons, but yeah. But there is nothing to replace that physical interaction with your coworkers. So while you can do all sorts of things like GitLab has the concept of coffee chats. You join a Slack channel and a bot will match two people up, and then you just have a 30-minute conversation about whatever you want, and it's just anytime you guys can fit in your schedule, just chat. We have team and department specific channels. So I'm on a very deep part of GitLab. You can see it in my name here on Zoom. But the front end team in my group is me and two other people. So it's three of us. So we have our own little channel with our manager, and we can talk in there if we want, and we can talk about kind of whatever we want because there's four of us. So we can goof off, or we can talk about tech or whatever we want to do. And then you can kind of move up and go to my whole team. We can have a Slack channel just for the entire source code group at GitLab, and move up from there to more and more larger things. As you focus those things down to smaller groups of people, it becomes much more intimate, I guess. You feel more comfortable just kind of making jokes and laughing with your teammates. So keeping things focused to the people that you work with most closely to kind of build those bonds, I think is really useful. There are other things, but I'll let the other guys talk now. You guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I just started working at a small startup called Stackhawk on just in the middle of February, and it was amazing, how fast things changed. By the middle of March, we were totally remote, and kind of here we are. But one of the things that I really appreciate that the company did was at 4 o'clock, we have a team sync where we just get on a Zoom call and we kind of shoot the shit. Maybe we're talking about blockers or bugs or problems we're having, but other times we just talk about how our day was going. And I think that's a really important part to kind of get like, when we're all working remote, it's amazing how much work can be done when we're not distracted by an office full of people. But some of that distraction is like what like company culture is, like what is like the shit that gets shot during the day. So to kind of actively work to find a place and time for that, I think is important. For me, I make sure to the people that I'm mentoring or more junior than me, like, try not to be overbearing on them, but also constantly ask them for feedback and what they need, and just checking in as often as you can, because you don't know if that other person, maybe they're scared to bring up a question, maybe they're having imposter syndrome, and so maybe reaching out is a little harder for them. So I try to make sure that I'm kind of constantly reaching out and saying, hey, like, we can walk through a problem, you can use me as a rubber duck. If you don't need anything, great, like that's probably the best. But I think there's something to be said about over communication in a time like this when we don't get that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah, I mean, it's for the most part, the team at Frontier has been kind of doing a lot of what Gitlab, or at least what Thomas has been doing, where we have our own private Slack channel where it's just random banter, or like someone just throws out a random like, "Hey, I'm running into this issue. Can someone have the knowledge to help me with it?" We are during our morning stand-ups, we all get on video chat, so we have some sort of interaction. And we've also done remote happy hours. I'm sure a lot of you've seen that on either LinkedIn or Twitter, wherever we've been doing those a lot, where we just we either talk about work, or just we've been playing Jackbox, the party games, a lot on there. So just anything that kind of like kind of what Nick said, to keep the company culture, or even your team culture going in the kind of an interesting. If you move from in an office space to full remote, if you're starting full remote, I imagine it's a little bit different, since I just don't have that experience.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. Our team recently had our create stage team day, in sort of in relation to our virtual meetup that's usually physical. And we got on a Zoom call like this, and we played a lot of Drawsaurus online, which is basically, I think it's charades, but online. So one person is drawing some picture and everyone else has to guess what it is. So it was a fun way to sort of just see people how they draw. Everyone's a pretty good artist. If you get to draw like little lines, it's not very hard. So it's just a fun time to do that kind of stuff. I'm gonna skip, Gabe. I'm gonna skip your question real quick because Daniel had a follow-up question. Daniel, do you want to verbalize that?
Sure. I was curious to know, how do you handle conflict resolution when you can't meet face to face? I know like a lot of people have as best practice, like if you have something serious to say, do it in person. What do you do when you can't? Like, what does that look like?
I can start us off. First of all, I think it requires a culture of assuming the best. So often conflicts arise when someone misreads intention or is insulted by something that the person delivering that message didn't intend to be insulting, but it kind of came across that way. And the first place that I try to start from is assuming that person did not mean to insult me or say something rude or whatever, just assuming they were delivering facts. And then assuming that someone isn't trying to sort of impose on me. And then the next step is exactly like you said. I agree that like, and GitLab has this as part of their policies actually, is if you have a problem, you go directly to that person and talk to them one-on-one. And it would be just like this for us at GitLab. It's a Zoom call, one face-to-face, and talking with the other person about what you feel in a objective way, and not trying to attack that person, and see to get a read for them. I don't think anyone, if presented with like, hey, this seemed really insulting, and or I feel like you've made an error in judgment here, and whatever the problem is, whatever the conflict is, I don't think anyone, when presented with that, is going to be like, well, yeah, that was my intention, I hope you're insulted. You can usually come to some middle ground. Yeah, having that one-to-one thing, even if it's over video call, I think that's the right way to do it. I know some people, they need the more physical, like you can read a lot from body language and you don't get quite as much of that or really any of it from a video call. So the only thing is kind of reiterate something that Mike said earlier in his presentation. Communication is everything. You have to, and I think I think Nick might have said this, over communication is a really big deal. Just say everything. When I write up issues or whatever at GitLab, sometimes you have to scroll to read the whole thing. I know that's not great. People don't like to read, but the information is there. And so having, when you're having that face-to-face conversation, it's just putting it all out there is really, really important.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to follow up on that because I think the over communication part is definitely like the biggest aspect of it. Like, it's almost like I want to like liken it to how Twitter, it's like you can't infer what somebody means in the the character limit, and even sometimes you misinterpret what somebody's saying in a longer thread post on, I don't know, your whatever forum or thread you're using. So I think I agree with Thomas's sentiment of assume that they mean the best, like, and they're not trying to come off as negative or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, just to shortly kind of maybe cap this thought off, but like, what we're doing is very difficult when you think about how people react to emotion, and there's like all these little, it's this body language, there's these subtle nuances in posture and the way your lips and your eyes move that like you lose a lot of that through Zoom. And so these cues that we've been evolved to react to are totally lost on Zoom. Like it's just not the same. And so finding ways to work through that is really important. I think we're all learning lots about that right now. but that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot as of late, you know, like starting at a new place and, you know, just missing some of the tone from my coworkers, understanding who is, you know, short but means well, and who is like, you know, is too verbose and it needs to be told to slow down a little bit. So, you know, I think we all deserve a pat on the back for learning and navigating these things.
Sometimes these things just take time too. You mentioned something about someone who's short, you know, when they're talking or writing. And I have a few coworkers who are from like Eastern Europe, you know, ex-Russian states, and that's just sort of their culture. They're just like very short and to the point, and they're not being mean, they're not being rude, but it's sort of in American culture, we like to couch things in like, you know, maybe, what about, how about, you know, I feel like maybe, and they don't do that at all. It's just like right to the point. And they're not being mean, they're just delivering the information. And so like learning those sort of nuances is really important to like not feeling hurt by someone.
Yeah, and don't want to continue the point too much, but even with like a team that like I've been working with for almost a year and a half now, it's like we kind of all know each other's, the way we kind of all write messages, so it's not too difficult for us to understand how they're coming across, which can definitely help. But if you're coming into, you know, a fully remote team that's always been remote, it could be a little more difficult, I'd imagine, to, you know, take time to learn those nuances or those tics that they may have.
Cool. Thanks for the thumbs up, Daniel.
Yeah.
Gabe, I'm going to skip you again to move to Dave. Dave, do you want to verbalize your question?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. A couple months ago, I thought that a remote position would be absolutely 100% the ideal thing for me. After, you know, studying, going to school for 2 months now, I'm starting to have my doubts on that. And so I've been kind of thinking, you know, maybe some sort of hybrid, you know, come in a couple days a week, or maybe something a little more routine than the annual thing that you folks do, Thomas. But need some kind of in-person interaction with the coworkers is the way I'm feeling now. So I guess if you guys were to, you know, job duties, everything aside, just be able to pick your schedule, would you do the fully remote? Would you do in person, or would you like some sort of hybrid there?
I'll start this one off. I think it's important to remember that what we're doing is not like, we're in lockdown right now. I think a remote job where you don't have to commute, maybe you can work asynchronously on your time, and you can still go out to concerts and you can still go see your friends. You know, I wonder if you would have a different perspective. You know, I think for me, ideally, maybe a hybrid where you do get to have that in-person interaction with your coworkers and your team would be ideal for me. But I've definitely had the same sentiment as you, Dave, where I'm like, wow, remote sucks. And it's like, well, this isn't the perks of a remote job. This is the situation that we're in. So it's a little different, but I do think you're going to see a lot of companies, like you can't put the genie back in the bottle. They're going to have to start to do some sort of hybrid remote work because people are just getting used to it.
Yeah, I want to give a strong second to what Nick said about this isn't normal. Dave, I'm not sure if you thinking that remote isn't for you now is a result of this like quarantine remote. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely does have something to do with it there now. Yeah. The more I think about it, Nick, and mentioning concerts and, you know, going out, things like that, breathe a little life into me. But I do think that there is some of that too, of just, you know, kind of what you were saying earlier, Nick, the, you know, office culture and things like that, that it's a little bit harder to replicate online.
Yes, I definitely want to second that. Having worked remote for many years before this, this is nothing like a real solid, good remote job. It's exhausting. I've done this for years and years, and the last couple of months have been completely exhausting. I've been way more stressed out and anxious than normal. It's a completely different environment. when you don't have the option to go out and like do your own thing. You have to stay in, you have to be remote. That makes it really tough. That said, to answer your question, what's my ideal job? I would be fully remote, but I like what GitLab does, and I hate to keep bringing GitLab up, but I love my job and I love my company. So what GitLab is fully remote. We don't have any offices, but every employee has the option to completely expense a workspace. So if you need to work with other people, you are welcome to go find a co-working space and work with people you don't know, just to have that office culture. Or we have some employees. Denver's a large enough hub that we have enough employees here where we have a WeWork space. Who knows how long WeWork's going to be around, but we have WeWork space, and so you can go to WeWork and work with other GitLab employees. I think that's my ideal situation. Obviously, is full remote, but if you want to, the company will pay for you to go to an office, because there's nothing can replace that office culture. It has to be a slightly different thing if you go full remote.
Yeah, and kind of even to continue that point there, like Frontier's been put into this weird position, especially our development team, where we actually wanted more options to be fully remote, like when we were possible, but there was kind of a weird, culture thing going on where, well, so now we're forced to do it. So it's kind of like, it's been a good experience to like, kind of get at least, it's not the ideal remote experience, but it is something to get the idea of like, okay, this is kind of how it would work. And now we're like discussions are starting to happen of like maybe even doing a hybrid option. So I guess it kind of just depends on like how like the balance of like separating work and life. Like that's kind of the biggest thing I've been learning about this is like like Nick said, like not being able, like for me, not being able to go to the gym has been like super dire. Like I could imagine it's like, oh, I imagine I'd be doing great right now if I could just, get out and go to the gym and, work off that stress I gain throughout the day. Like walks around the neighborhood can only do so much. So hopefully you could, get the true remote experience. And I'd also like the true remote experience eventually. So.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Tom, do you want to verbalize your question? It's directed at me, so I can answer it real quick if you'd like. Tom had a question that asked about GitHub's connection to Microsoft versus GitLab. And since Microsoft has their product called Teams, he asked if it was a good solution for working remotely, and in particular, if any features are especially useful. Tom, I have a simple answer for you. I have never, ever used Teams in my entire life, so I have no insight for you. I'm sorry.
Luckily, I do use Teams.
Zach can answer for you.
So Frontier actually uses Teams and Slack. The developers mostly use Slack, but then when we need to communicate to other parts of the business, we have Teams set up. At least from what I've found, it seems fine. Like it seems pretty comparable to Zoom for the most part. Like there doesn't seem to be any lacking features other than maybe like the video backgrounds that Zoom has, like the things that you don't necessarily need. So yeah, I mean, Teams seems like it's been a fine solution for the most part. I mean, I've used Teams and Slack now. I haven't used Zoom other than just this, so I can't really compare between that, but Teams seems fine to be honest.
Cool. We can, Tom's microphone and camera aren't working at the moment, so we can circle back if he's got any follow-up questions. But Tom, I hope that was enough info for you. Okay. We had a question from Peter. Peter, did you want to verbalize?
Yeah, I could jump on. It's just back to the conversation you guys were having about, working remotely during this time and nonverbal cues and kind of picking up on everyone else's, I guess, mannerisms. I have an interview coming up with a CEO and a director this coming Monday, and it's via Zoom. So it's kind of like round 3. But I'm just wondering if you guys, I mean, I've been working remotely now for the past, obviously since quarantine came in effect, but I wonder if you had any specific tips or tricks when you don't have time to get to know other people. You don't have multiple meetings. You don't have, you may have 60 or even just maybe 10, 15 minutes to kind of really make an impression, and just love to hear your thoughts on it. So thanks.
Yeah. I think of the three of us, I'm the only one who's actually interviewed for a remote job. I think. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but so I'll give you my insight first. When I interviewed at GitLab, the process was we started with a recruiter, and so I'm sorry to say that you're starting directly with like C-suite folks, because you've had other
Yeah,
stuff.
this is like the third time. So I started with a
good.
recruiter, did a whole tech interview,
Yeah.
did homework and all that, and reviewed all the homework and stuff. So this is kind of latter stages, but meeting with the CEO and director.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I mean, my first note to you directly is just they have liked you so far. So don't be super anxious. You know, just like an in-person interview, when you get called back multiple times, that means good things. Companies don't waste time on people that they aren't expecting to hire. And so unless something goes really terribly wrong, you're okay. So that's kind of my first thing is, you know, whether you're in person or you're on a call, people are generally there because they're interested in you. And just take that to heart and let it sort of come back out as relaxation. I think that the biggest problem that people can have on a call like this is just being too stiff, being too formal. When I interviewed at GitLab, I put a suit coat on and a tie and a shirt because I wanted to show them that I was really interested in the job, but we were still having a nice chat. I talked with my potential manager, I talked with the director of engineering, and we just had fun chats. The director of engineering is from Austria, and we talked about Austrian stuff, and that was fun. So just like relax and have a real human conversation. Don't worry too much about, you know, people can't see your body language, so that's okay. I normally talk with my hands a lot, and I think that sort of thing helps a bit on video calls for people to see, you know, something other than just your shoulders and your head. I'm like, you know, I talk like this. I'm making emphasis. The sort of common knowledge about calls these days going around is this is a performance, and so as with most performances, you kind of have to over emote so that your emotions come across, and that's why these calls are always super exhausting, because you're always making a performance for everyone else on the call, but don't let that performance affect you being you. Be relaxed and calm, and you'll do fine. That's my main advice for interviewing. Just because you're on a video call shouldn't change that. I would say be relaxed and calm and be yourself in a regular interview too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits you have right now is the fact that you're in your space, so you can kind of set up. You're not gonna have any weird curveballs with like the environment of, oh well, maybe the chair was pinching your back wrong or something. Like you kind of have those outside factors kind of locked down, so you can kind of manage how to deal with that. And yeah, I mean, be yourself. That's gonna be probably the most effective way. So.
Yeah, I just want to say at the JAMStack conference last year, me and Thomas were there, in the hand motions. He made this 30-minute presentation into 7 minutes, and his hands were just, you couldn't even see him. They're moving so fast. It was amazing. But to piggyback on what these other cats have been saying, you know, one thing I'd recommend to you is like that elevator pitch, the story that you're trying to tell about yourself and why you're excited to work there. Without the body language and the social cues, you know, there's less parameters to this equation. So if you can look at yourself in the mirror and be very confident with how you kind of say these first couple questions, it's going to be much easier when you start just talking off the cuff. You know, there's going to be a couple intro questions and stuff that you can say, and if you can feel like you really land those things, I feel like you're going to feel really good for the rest of the interview. Congrats to getting to the third round of the interview. And yeah, just be comfortable. I know Thomas had a great tip to me personally earlier, where it's like, you know, maybe you eat a good breakfast and you put your work shoes on and you just act like it's a normal day, and this remote thing isn't happening. So if you think that might work for you, I'd definitely say do that.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate something that Nick just said, nothing will calm you down and make you feel more confident than preparation. If you've read every bit of company material and you know your answers to why do you want to work here and why are you looking for a job and what are you interested in, if you know those answers just right off the top of your head and you can just spout about them for hours, that will just give you a lot of confidence to just talk about things and feel confident and seem confident. And that's really important on a call like this. Cool. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Let's see. Alice, do you want to verbalize your question?
Sure. Thank you all for doing this panel. It's been very insightful, and thanks, Mike, for your presentation. In the same vein of like juniors onboarding, like there's a lot of like stopping by desks and like finding the right people in the company to ask questions of, and like that whole onboarding process and like finding where the experts are now in a remote setting. I'm not quite sure like how much more beyond the like explicit communication, like get in the Slack channels, find those things that you want to add to that. But if you have anything, that would be great.
So I can start off this one since I've actually had to do this recently. So we hired at Frontier. We hired a junior back in, I want to say November, December. I'm trying to remember when she started. So she hasn't been at Frontier very long, and she's still, there's a lot of system knowledge and like tribal knowledge within like how everything like works, because our code base is enormous and very confusing. And I've become more or less the default person to go to now. So my biggest thing that I've been able to do for her is at least like share how I kind of walk through the code and like point out things like with a screen share. Like there's been several times where she's like, hey, I'm having trouble trying to find this thing. Can you help me? It could be, at least for me, I do better speaking when I explain it instead of trying to type it out in a chat. So that's been my most effective tactic, and it seems like that's been able to help her a bunch. And also kind of being like, I'm kind of in this like mid senior role. This is kind of like helping me also grow a skill set. Just a bonus side effect of like, okay, I can at least share knowledge on that. And also they've been doing well about just, verbalizing like, hey, I can't, even if it's something simple of, oh, I can't find where this, this JavaScript function it lives. Can you help me do that? Just to make sure they verbalize like where they're getting lost, I think has been the biggest piece to helping them like, get up to speed faster than even though they've been with a company for a few months already.
Yeah, I'll tack onto that really quick. Some advice I really like to give to juniors that I think is even more important now is understanding when a problem is taking too long to solve. And for me, that's like, there's just a switch in my brain where it's just like, wow, this should be easy. And I've been looking at it for a really long time. It's time to ask for help. Just really understanding that wherever that point is for you when you're getting frustrated with the problem. Because when you're by yourself, it is even more frustrating. So I would just say to learn to recognize that part in your problem solving process.
Yeah, and to maybe put a little cap on both of those things, if your company didn't already, find a person who is your onboarding buddy. At GitLab, when we start, we have an onboarding buddy who's like they're with you your first 4 or 5 months, because that's about how long they expect you to kind of be lost is like 4 or 5 months. And if your company didn't give you one of those, find someone on your team or someone who's just been friendly, and say, can you be my buddy for the next like 3 to 4 months? Because I need someone to guide me around the code, and I need someone to guide me around the company and the culture. And that person, if they say yes, I hope that they understand that like you can go to them for anything, and you should go to them for anything. Don't be afraid to reach out, because the worst thing you can do onboarding as a junior is just be silent, because part of getting acclimated to a company is like being visible, and like people say, oh, hey, I know this person. And when a question comes up, it's weird, but like if I know somebody in Slack and they ask a question, I'm more likely to answer their question because I know who they are. So I feel more comfortable just being like, hey, here's the answer. So be that person, be visible, be you might think it's annoying, but just like be visible in your company, be like, hey, I'm new here and I need help. And hopefully people will help you.
Great, thank you so much. That was all really helpful.
Oh, let's see.
Should we get to Gabe's questions?
Yeah, Gabe, you're up. Gabe, you want to verbalize your question?
Verbalize it for you. Yeah, I want to know, I guess from Zach and Nick especially, how you, I guess, recreate your work environment at home. Like what's your setup and what do you do like in your routines that kind of simulate work?
So I got a couple points here, and these two things. Trying to spin this positive, but like the hardest parts about it for me have been, firstly, you know, the place where I work, where you see me now. This is where I work. You know, I work on music here. I chat with my friends, and so it's like it all happens here in this same space. And that kind of leads into the second point that I wanted to make, is that after doing this for a few weeks, I told myself I had to work really hard during working hours because, you know, throughout the day I'd go on a run or I'd make a big lunch and I'll be like, oh, I'll work till 7. And then you go out and you're like, okay, I'll work till 8 or 9. And like every single day was starting to look like that, where it's like you never really stopped working. And so Zach kind of pinged on this earlier, but just finding that balance and defining it. Like if you have to write it down in a journal or something, do it, because it is really easy to get overworked and burnt out in this situation. So sorry to be a downer, but I think those are really important parts, kind of tangential to your question, Gabe, I hope.
Yeah, I think I'm still looking for that balance.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to it already, but yeah, work-life balance is probably the biggest thing. And like Nick said, like the space you see, this is where I work. My work setup's here, and then all my streaming and gaming PC is right next to me too. And something that's been at least I want to shift into is having a dedicated workspace. So I have an extra room in my house. I'm gonna go set that up as an office fairly soon, so I can leave work in that area, and then this is my personal space again. Because, yeah, like Nick said, like if you never go offline, because you're kind of this weird perspective of, oh, well, I'm remote, so I'm always available, but that's not the case, because then you truly will burn yourself out. I've definitely, like when Frontier went full remote, the first months, I struggled to find that balance, because I was like responding to every message immediately, and it's like, all right, well, maybe you don't have to respond to that message immediately, because they're not going to come to you in person. Like you can take a second if you're busy with something, or you're trying to answer another question. Like you don't have to answer every message or every ping immediately. Like just trying to find a good offline period and a good online period is definitely helpful. And if possible, like if your company allows work with your managers to say like, hey, can this be my dedicated time of I'm always going to be online during these periods, and then I'm offline after this, like unless it's 100% an emergency. Like I think that would be really beneficial for a lot of people.
I had a one-on-one with my manager. We do one-on-ones every week, and last week, so at the beginning of every milestone, our manager asks us how much time we're expecting to take off. We have an unlimited time off policy, so he's just like, how many days are you taking off, so I know what to schedule. And I said I was going to take 4 days off this milestone, and a week ago, I hadn't taken any time off yet. We're halfway through, and so I had a one-on-one with my manager, and I was like, I have to take some time off, and that means I'm going to take off every Friday and Monday between now and the end of the milestone. He's like, that's fine. And then this weekend, I did not take every day off. I was supposed to take Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday off. And I worked a little bit on Sunday, worked a little bit on Monday. And I had a one-on-one with my manager, and he wasn't mad, but he was like, you have to get better at this. You have to be better at taking the time off. Because if, like these guys are saying, if you don't take the time off, you will burn out. So having a company that is will support you in that is really important, because you have to understand that like your health is sort of the wellspring of everything, right? Your health is the wellspring of your ability to code in general. It's the wellspring of your ability to be creative, which is really important with a lot of programming solutions. And if you're exhausted and you're working too much, you can't do those things very well. So taking that time is really important.
Yeah. It's almost like the next level of self-management of like, all right, when you have like a dedicated office space, like, or a place you commute to, like, okay, I got to be here at this time. And when you're at full, like, you're at home all the time, those things start to blur. So it's kind of, it's like you have to be more regimented than you're used to already. So.
Yeah, Daniel mentioned in the chat that a big benefit of having a co-working space is that separation of work from home, and that is 100% why GitLab pays for employees to go to a co-working space, because some people can't do the remote thing. They're just being inside their house means they're always working, so they have to go to that co-working space. And for some people, that's what they need. For me, I just have a corner of a room with a standing desk and my microphone and that kind of stuff, and this is where I work, and this is only where I work, and that works for me. But everybody needs something different. So Nick has a cross-panel question. Nick, you want to verbalize it?
Yeah, kind of just following like that last question. I know GitHub is or GitLab is, very remote centric, and this idea of asynchronous working is cool. But like with what we just talked about, I'm just curious to know how you manage asynchronous work. I mean, do you sit down from 8 to 5 and just get it done and then sign off for the day? And so like, what does that look like for you personally, as well as like answering your international teammates' requests that maybe come through in the middle of the night?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, as I alluded to earlier, I'm not very good at disconnecting. So there have been plenty of days where I'll start work and I'll work throughout the day, and then I'll take time off for dinner or whatever, and then at like 9 p.m., my compatriots from like Iceland are coming online in the morning their time, and so I'll start to work with them until like midnight, and that's not super healthy, but sometimes I do that. The best way to manage async work is to understand that it will take more time. It's okay that things are going to be delayed a little bit. So at GitLab, our policy is your first priority is unblocking your teammates or unblocking anyone. So when I am assigned a merge request to review, or I am asked a question on an issue or whatever, that takes priority over my deliverable work. It takes priority over whatever else. My job is to unblock someone else, and that comes directly from the fact that we're async, right? So if someone from some European time zone asks me a question, they're going to ask it in their day, which is the end. That's like nighttime for me, and that means that the best they can hope for is that I'll answer it in their nighttime, and then the next day they can get to it. So in order to make sure that we have the minimum lag time, my first priority is answering that question or getting to whatever they need from me, so that their expectation is met. The next day it's available for them. Our second policy there is, if you don't have the bandwidth to do something, you immediately tell that person, like, hey, I can't do this review. I'm really sorry. I have to hand it off to someone else. Find someone else to do this. I'm sorry. And that's okay. It's okay to do that. But the biggest thing is just understanding that with remote and async work, sometimes people are not going to be available for you at that moment. You said, do I just get on at 8 and crank it out till 5? Absolutely not. 8 is ungodly early. I get on at like 10:30 and work until, I don't know, 5 o'clock or so. Take a little bit of break, maybe working for an hour or two in the evening. But the beauty of async is that no one is expecting me at 8 o'clock. We all kind of do our own thing, and my job is to unblock people when I'm around.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Anything else?
I think Daniel's got one more for us.
Yeah, Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, follow-up question for you, Thomas. In an async situation, and you need to resolve a blocker for somebody who's going to have to resolve it like their next day, does that up the pressure on you to provide a ton of context for any question that you need an answer for them and vice versa?
Yes. Yeah. Particularly since we're such a big company, we have something like 1,400 employees, and like half of those are developers. Particularly because of that, I can't assume that anyone knows what I'm talking about or what I'm asking about or anything. So yeah, I over communicate as much as possible. My goal is to like send a question off to someone or answer something and just give them everything that I can think of or know about. And sometimes it gets a little rambly, and I try to avoid that. I don't like to ramble too much in text, but giving them more information is better than them having to come back 24 hours later and be like, "Can you clarify this?" And then another 24 hours goes, and I've clarified it. Just do it up front. Provide all that context. Provide all that information. Absolutely, I think you're spot on there.
Are there a lot of like hand wavy and finger pointy emojis in your long rambling answers, or is that something we just get on Zoom?
It's just Zoom. In my long answers, I use GitHub and Gitlab both have Markdown available in most of comments and that kind of stuff. So I use the titles, the 2 hash marks to make it an H2 subheader, and I break my comments down like that, so I can say, here's the context, here's what I'm thinking, here's the problem, here's what I've identified as the problem, here's what I'm expecting the solution to be, and then they can kind of respond to those in chunks and read it sort of how my brain was going through like context, problem, solution.
So Jeff's got a question. Jeff, do you want to vocalize it?
Sure. So I was curious if anybody has a favorite virtual whiteboard tool. Like we do lots of documentation, lots of sequence diagrams, lots of architecture diagrams, but we're missing that like rapid iteration, rapid prototyping on a whiteboard, because all of these tools for like actually making pretty pictures take a bit of time. So I wondered if anybody had any favorites around that, because I know that some of my teammates are really struggling to communicate without a whiteboard.
That's a good question. I don't, but I have an iPad with the Apple Pencil, so now I'm kind of like thinking of trying to find a setup for that, because that would be really useful. I don't know if I know Thomas has his normal whiteboard, so I don't know how do you share that with the people, Thomas?
No, and this is an interesting question. It's come up a lot over my career. Just like people are like, I want to be able to whiteboard something, and I've used whiteboards in the past to like architect a whole new system when we had an office. I worked in an office their office was multiple states away, but when I visited, we would use a whiteboard. I have never needed to use a whiteboard at GitLab, and I don't know why. Because I don't think that needing a whiteboard is necessarily the antithesis of remote. I don't think it is. So I don't know what it is that makes it so that I have never needed to use a whiteboard in conjunction with other people. I use it for my own stuff. You can see my girlfriend has written Wednesday on the board here, and I've got my checklist of things to do, all kinds of stuff. But I don't use this to communicate with other people, and I don't have a good answer for what a good whiteboarding tool is. So I'm sorry.
So Daniel actually responded in the chat. He says that Turing used Miro. I haven't heard of that one before, so maybe that might be an option though. If you want to elaborate on that, Daniel, at all.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible. A lot of what we did was using some of its more straightforward functionality to do things like post-it notes in place of things that we would have done in person by brainstorming, by putting a post-it note on a board, or certain agile ceremonies where we would have like worked together to post ideas on a physical whiteboard. But it also has a lot of built-in templates for things like sequence diagramming and entity relationship diagrams, and a lot more advanced stuff if you need that as well. But I think you can use it as simply as a whiteboard. It's pretty great.
Well, thanks.
think just to give you maybe some insight into GitLab, and there's no judgment here because I think I'll say this in the answer. We don't have like a whiteboarding type tool built into GitLab, and GitLab uses GitLab pretty much exclusively to do our work. So that may contribute to why we don't do whiteboarding. We write things down exclusively in issues, and that's where we document things. I maybe suspect that if GitLab heard lots of pressure from customers that they wanted a whiteboarding tool, we might add one, and then that might become part of our culture. But right now, we just write things in issues, and we write everything out in text. Here's my idea. Here's what I'm thinking, and that's how we communicate ideas. Yeah, and by the way, Peter mentioned that you can buy whiteboards for pretty cheap. I would say if you're going to be working remote for any amount of significant time, get your company to buy you a big whiteboard. This thing is like, I don't know, it's like 4x6 or 4x, I don't know, it's big. It's a big whiteboard, and it's really nice. It's mounted on my wall, and I've got it filled with just like checklists and all kinds of things that I want to do. Some of it's personal, some of it's work. Have your work do that, because like if whiteboarding helps, just like rotate your laptop and like share a whiteboard with everybody. Obviously it's not like interactive, but like having that there would be great. So get your work to buy you one, because it's cheap for them and it could have really great returns. Any questions? Anybody else have anything? I did want to share one link. I don't know if this link is going to be updated much, because there isn't a ton here, but in the past, I've done these remote Q&A sessions, and often I or someone else will get questions after the fact, and I want to be able to share that with everyone. So if you go to this this link here, I'm posting it in chat. That is a blog post that I have on my site for today's event. It also links out to a previous event, so you can read through some of the questions that I was asked after the fact of that event, as well as watching the video. I'll keep this updated with this video, presumably after a little bit of editing at the beginning of our session today.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll update with the video. I'll update with any questions that I'm asked after the fact. If these other guys get any questions, I'll update with theirs too, if that's okay. Having somewhere to go to sort of have everything in one spot, I think is really important. So there's a link if you're interested. Well, thank you, everyone. A huge thanks to Mike. Thank you, Mike, for coming in and giving us your insight there. That was really useful. I really like that. Sorry again about Zoom bombing. That's the risk we take by publishing our link publicly. Sorry about that. And thanks for coming out. Hopefully we'll see y'all in person sometime soon, but if not, next month there'll be another remote one.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Mike.